Human resource. Victoria, this is the meat of it. You get through this, we give you a break, so thanks for your indulgence.
All right, let the fun begin. Okay. First thing, and I want to set the stage just as much as Dr. McGrath did. I think when you look at human resources, it's very, very easy to lay blame. It's very easy to say the fire department gets too much. It's very easy to say that the city did this or the city didn't do that. Let's put it bluntly. When it comes to an agreement, a contract is signed by two parties. It's signed by the city and it's signed by the AFF, which means both parties did it, not one versus the other. Okay. You worked together somehow to get there, or in some cases you had a third party make that decision for you. The contract didn't happen overnight. This just didn't happen with this last negotiation session with the current negotiation team for the city and the current union board. This contract has evolved over the years. It is not atypical to find that all of a sudden over the years things have changed. We go into contract negotiations with our list of things that we want to talk about. And sometimes when we change the language for this one item, we sometimes forget or we neglect to see the consequences for other impacts to language within that contract. This is not unusual. This is not unique to the Department of Elyria. I've negotiated contracts for almost 12 different unions over 17 years. And this happens all over the place. The problem is, once this comes to someone's attention, what are we going to do about it? And I guess that's the question we're going to do right now. You know, can the two parties work together? I'll tell you, when I asked that question, when I did interviewing, I got mixed results. Unfortunately, it wasn't a consensus. I had a lot of people give me lip service that said, yes, this time it's going to be different. This time we are going to lay down the past, we are going to stop the grievances, we are going to stop the arguing in the press because we want to move forward to provide quality service to our residents. And I guess the question is now, your feet are to the fire, no pun intended. What are you going to do about it? Contract negotiations. You need to maintain some consistency. I heard there's a variety of different combinations of city negotiating teams with attorneys, without attorneys, with mayors, without mayors, with safety services directors, without safety service directors. That was what can cause problems throughout the years. And so therefore you need to have some consistency. Who needs to be at the table? I'm going to talk about in a few minutes human resources. You need to have somebody from human resources. You need to have somebody who has the consistency among all employees within this organization to make sure that there's fair, equitable distribution of benefits among all employees, as well as taking in the unique differences that each department might have. Right now, 9 times out of 10, the fire chief is not at the table. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Your fire chief or the second in command needs to be at that table. You need to have somebody who's going to say, this is how this is going to affect fire operations. Absent that person, people like myself can make all kinds of decisions and not realize the ramifications that it's going to have on the operations. And in some cases, you need to have a labor attorney. I would highly recommend in this organization, if it's at all possible, you try to change your negotiation stance and look at something called consensus bargaining. And that's, instead of coming in with our laundry list of ideas that we're going to bicker and yell about across the table, we identify problems and we work together to develop those solutions. It does work. I've done it in every organization that I've been with, no offense except with FOP. For some reason, cops didn't like it. But we did it with everybody else. When it came to a fire contract in another municipality, we actually instituted a paramedic training program, rewrote 3/4 of the language, and there was only one attorney sitting at the table who represented both sides. And at times, we probably sounded more like labor and they sounded more like management. But we worked together to come up with the solutions. There's a lot of issues within this contract, which means there's a lot of opportunities, and you need to work together to determine what those are. I know when the draft report, there are some people that didn't like this. You need to keep the politics out of it. It's very evident by reading this report, it's littered with politics. Someone did a favor for somebody on both sides of the table. I'm not blaming the city, I'm not blaming just the union, it's both of you. You need to concentrate on wages, hours, and working conditions, what's fair to the employee, and more importantly, how are you serving the citizens of this community in a cost-effective and efficient manner. Let's get the sweetheart deals out of here. This organization has a good habit of negotiating in the press. Enough said. Few slides and we'll give you a break. Manuals, overall, I'm sorry, the city needs an employee handbook. You have no employee handbook. There is a lot of language in the firefighter contract that doesn't need to be there, and it's probably there because it's no place else. There's no reason why IRS mileage rates should be in the contract. It should be a city manual that applies to all employees. You need a manual, you need to codify all the rules and regulations. The fire department has a great SOG manual, however, no one knows about it. No one's trained on it, and in fact, most people had a hard time finding a copy for us. It hasn't been updated in quite a while. I know since the new chief's been on board, a whole 2 months, they've dusted it off and they're starting to take a look at it. It needs to be up to date, it needs to be trained on, it needs to be implemented, and employees all through the fire department need to be held accountable for it. Get a labor management committee and start working on it together. This doesn't have to be one person's project who gets stuck in the back room. Get everyone involved in developing what are the best operations for the Elyria Fire Department. I know you're in fiscal time periods. I'm also biased. My background is human resources. You need an HR director for the city. Right now, you have that function spread out as components of pieces and multiple people. That's why a lot of the stuff is falling through the cracks. This cannot be a political appointee. This needs to be a person who is screened through some sort of committee, who has an HR background, who's worked in a municipality before, who has experience with contract negotiations. The rule of thumb is one HR person for every 150 employees. You're well past that. Plus you have what, 12, 13 unions? You need somebody who's trained in HR to help bring that whole process together.